Welcome to Generation Inspired, exploring the people and ideas shaping tomorrow.
What if one of the biggest myths we've ever been told is that school is the best way for children to learn? Today's guest is Dr. Peter Gray. He's a psychologist, researcher, and author of the best-selling book Free to Learn. Now, for decades, Peter has studied how children actually learn when they're given something that most schools rarely allow, which is freedom. So that freedom to explore, to play, to follow their curiosity. And what this research shows is so fascinating. When young people are trusted to direct their own learning, they often become more motivated, capable, and resilient than we ever imagined. So, if we want a generation that can think for themselves, adapt to change, and solve real problems, maybe the real question isn't how we improve school. Maybe it's whether we need to rethink it altogether.
Think of the kids who are going to college and they've never taken a course before.
Kids
So
are adaptable, aren't they?
one of the things I asked them in this initial study, and for those some of them we just surveyed by paper and pencil, but some of them we interviewed who lived in the area still. And I would ask, so you went to college, you had you were majoring in biology, but you had never taken a biology course in high school. So there you were in a college biology course, and everybody else had taken high school biology. Was that a problem for you? What, and if so, in what way was it a problem? And they periodically would say, "Well, I was a little worried about it, but it turned out that the professor really starts from the beginning. And moreover, if he uses some word that I don't know that maybe the other kids would know from high school, I just look it up." You know, so and today, of course, that's even easier to do than it would have been then. You just Google it. The professor's been talking about meiosis. What the heck is meiosis? I'll Google it. Oh, that's what meiosis is. Uh, so they didn't find it to be difficult. Most of them said they really felt they were an advantage over the other students there because first of all, if they decided to go to college, it was their own decision. They wanted to be there. They weren't there because they felt they were pressured there by their parents, and they wanted to get the most out of it. And secondly, they had been responsible for their own education all along. And so in college, where you don't have somebody always looking over your shoulder telling you exactly what to do, and you have to kind of manage your own life a little bit more because you're unfortunately, the mom is there now on the cell phone, but
Yes.
but not there right over your shoulder anyway. But the teachers aren't following you around telling you just exactly what to do. They give you an assignment and then you do it or you don't do it. And if you don't do it, you fail, right? So
Mm.
you kind of have to take a certain amount of responsibility. And these people at Sudbury Valley were used to taking responsibility, planning their days, figuring things out, learning how to learn what they needed to know, taking initiative. And and those advantages outweighed any disadvantages that they might have experienced from some kind of lack of knowledge of information
Mm.
that was taught in high
Yeah, that's
school.
awesome. Oh my goodness, I love that so much. You mentioned, school refusal. We are seeing a massive increase in issues with children with mental health stuff going on. Is Do you feel like this increase in depression, anxiety, and stuff is down to school in some way? In kids being stuck in that old way of doing things?
Well, uh, I think there's no doubt but what this is true. So I can't speak directly about Australia, but research in the United States and also in the UK, and also it turns out in Sweden, where I was just recently looking at research, shows that the recent increases in anxiety, depression, even suicide among teenagers are clearly linked to the changes in school policy that came with, in the United States, what's called the Common Core curriculum. In the UK, with what's the national school reform. That in the United States, this began in 2012, between 2010 and 2013. There was a massive change in how schooling works, where
Mm.
Students were given, there was more testing, there was a reduction in the choices of courses, but most significantly, there was a huge loss of autonomy for teachers. Teachers had to teach the core curriculum, and
Mhm.
then in most schools, there were people making sure they were all on the same page at the same time. So teachers were not free to try to change what they're doing in ways that engage the children more. And the stress of schooling greatly increased because everything began to depend upon scores on these standardized tests. Even teachers are being evaluated and judged based on how the students score. So the teaching is to the task. The lessons became more and more boring, more and more fragmented. You, instead of reading whole books for fun, you would read paragraphs and then respond to them because that's the way you'd be tested on at the end of the year. So the pressures of school greatly increased. There are studies showing, for example, let me just give you one example, and this is with teenagers. In the United States, the American Psychological Association every periodically does a study that they call Stress in America. It's a survey of, and usually it's a survey, it's a survey in which they ask the survey respondents about their stress, how stressed have you been, and what are the causes of stress. Normally, they do it just with adults, but in 2009 and then again in 2013, they included school-age teenagers, 13
Mm.
to 17-year-olds, and and what found is in 2013, which was after Common Core took effect, teenagers came out as the most stressed group in America, more so than
Oh
any
god.
group of adults. And 83% of them cited school as a source of their stress. Nothing else came close to that. Nothing else came close. Now,
Crazy.
what's interesting is in 2009, just by coincidence, the previous time they had done it had been just before Common Core began. And it wasn't that they were testing the effects of Common Core. It was just coincidence that they did this study with teens in 2009 and again in 2013. In 2009, the same kind of study, the same questions, still school came out on top, but it was only 43% who said
Mm.
school was a major source of stress, not 83%. So the number of teens saying school was a major source of their distress doubled between as a result of Common Core. I'm convinced of that. I'm writing a book about this and other similar changes right now.
Mm.
Very similar thing happened in the UK, especially in England, because this school change only occurred in England, but England comprises most of the UK population-wise. And there, the education change occurred in 2015, so a little bit later than at the United States. And in the UK, that's when the spike in anxiety and depression among teens occurred, timed with the change in schooling. So when a nation changes schooling in such a way as to make it more pressured, take away what little choices were already present, take away teachers' autonomy. I mean, teachers, for the most part, I do a lot of speaking to groups of teachers. I know a lot of teachers. My sister was a teacher for many years. Teachers are generally good people,
Absolutely.
like kids. They're in it because they
Yeah.
like kids. And good teachers, especially longtime teachers, can often figure out ways to accommodate at least some of the individual needs and differences among the kids. But now with these so-called reforms, teachers are not free to do that.
Mm.
They've got an administrator telling them exactly what they have to be doing on that day. No, you can't be having an intellectual discussion about this issue that was raised yesterday. Today, you've got to be studying page 89 of the book and doing workshops A, B, C, and D. This is what happened with my sister and the school she was teaching at when Common Core began to occur. She had been a very successful teacher for 22 years, happily teaching. Kids were happy. When this started, she became so depressed. She could see the kids were unhappy that she took a leave of absence for depression and then she resigned after that. She said, "There's no way I can go back. I can't even go back for the 2 or 3 more years I would need to go back for full to be on eligible for a full pension."
Mm.
She just couldn't stand doing it. Now, there were a lot of good teachers who quit as a result of that. This is even more true among kindergarten teachers because the effects were even more dramatic at the kindergarten and, believe it or not, even at the pre-kindergarten level, where people began forcing little children to sit in their seats and do worksheets and do tests. You began to have standardized tests of kindergartners and their
Oh
ability to
no.
use
Oh,
numbers and read. I mean, this is absolutely, there's no question but
soul
what it's done to
destroying.
you. And so this, so there, so absolutely. Now there's a belief, the common belief that the rise in anxiety, depression, suicide, and so on, beginning around 2010 and continuing up until now, is the result of kids being on social media so
Mhm.
much. Um, this is not true. I have really examined the data. Nobody who really does this research believes that's true. They've every there have actually been hundreds of studies, and none of them show overall a meaningful correlation between time on social media, time on this is what we want to say as a society because nobody wants to say at school. Nobody wants to say at school. It's easier to blame those greedy social media companies and technology companies. And uh, I do want to step back and say, yeah, there are some kids who are suffering from it, and there are some adults who are suffering from it. But it's a small number, and most kids are benefiting from it more than they're suffering from it. It's a means of keeping in touch with your friends, it's a means of play,
Yeah.
it's a means of gaining information. It's the most powerful educational vehicle that's ever been invented, and
Mhm.
kids use it for these purposes. But but this is so people have the evidence is overwhelming. And here's another piece of evidence. Now, I said that this rise in anxiety, depression, and even suicide occurred in the United States, and it correlates with Common Core. It occurred in the UK, and it correlates with their changes in education. In the entire European Union, taken as a whole, all EU countries taken together, there was no increase in anxiety, depression, or suicide over those years. They're
Oh,
not deprived
wow.
of social media. They're not deprived of cell phones. They're on it as much as kids anywhere else in the world. But they did not have these changes in schooling that occurred in the United States and in the UK. Now, I
Peter, why
can't
is this
speak to
being ignored? Like, why, if the evidence is there, are
this is
schools
the
taking this
question I
seriously?
keep asking. This is the question. This is why I'm writing a book on it, and I hope the book gets it out there.
Mm.
But this is I'm to write a book showing how over time, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. Over time, children's mental health goes up and down in relationship to what's happening in schools.
Mm.
And it should be surprising to us. Why should this be surprising to anybody? School children spend more time in school than anywhere else except home.
Yeah.
And school anybody should see that school is a stressful situation. It is a place where you're not free, even in the best of schools, unless it's Sudbury Valley, you're not free. You are micromanaged. You're constantly being evaluated. You're being compared to your peers. You're in a setting where you have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. You know, this is this setting that no sane adult would possibly accept for themselves. Nobody would take a job that
Yeah.
no for no amount of money would you take a job for where the conditions are like that. And yet that's where we send our kids. You know, that's where we send our kids.
It sounds
And
like you are doing some
and we
extremely
wanna
important
think
work.
and we want keep a halo around school. We wanna think of school as only good. And so even even that APAC that I described, you know, why didn't the American Psychological Association talk about that? I had to dig out the data. It's there.
Yeah.
But no article saying 83% of kids say school is what's stressing out. They did not publish that. They publish it. It's there as you look at the data, and there are other studies showing the same thing. In Europe, there are some people beginning to publish these relationships, and I'm happy to see that there is a correlation. between school pressure and children's levels of anxiety and depression. But still, somebody finds a tiny, clinically not even meaningful correlation between the amount of time that girls, it turns out to be only significant for girls, even in the tiny amount, it doesn't occur for boys. A tiny significant correlation when you're looking at thousands and thousands of cases. So it takes a tiny effect to be statistically significant. Correlation between time on social media and self reports of depression. It accounted for less than 1% of the variance. This study led to headlines about how social media causes depression. Now, first of all, everybody who knows anything about this knows that that effect was so small that it was not clinically significant. Secondly, this is a correlation, and you can't infer cause and effect from a correlation. It may well be if there is a relationship between depression and use of social media. Maybe kids are using social media to deal with depression. And so,
Yes.
in fact, there are some longitudinal studies showing that's exactly true, that some kids who get depressed start using social media. They don't feel quite up to meeting with others in person, but second best, meet them online, talk with other people. And some of them are using social media to deal with the depression, to look
Mhm.
for help with their depression, to find groups talking about how to deal with depression. So, we always imagine the worst in what teenagers and kids are doing. And when we actually talk with them and we actually ask them to describe what we're doing, we find that they're not so stupid, that
Yeah.
they're often using this stuff for benefit.
Mm.
So this is a real problem. We are a society, at least in the United States and most of the developed world, where nobody wants to criticize school. If kids aren't adapting to school, it's not the school's fault in everybody's mind. It's the parents' fault, or it's the kids' fault, or the kids have some kind of brain damage and they need some kind of therapy or drugs in order to correct correct the biological fault that they have. We keep diagnosing more and more kids as having disorders of one sort or another. And the more I look into these, the more I see they're really school induced, or they're disorders. If you call them disorders, that really result from the fact that schools simply can't accommodate the full range of normal human personalities. If you're a normal boy, and this is more true for boys and girls, who just finds it hard to sit still,
I've got
for
one of
long
those.
periods of time,
Yes.
or to or to do meaningless stuff that you're told to do, and if you're likely to get in the United States, at least, a diagnosis of ADHD, so in the past, these would just be regarded as restless kids, but you'd have more recesses, and you would just accept the fact that there's some kids who are just kind of squirmy. But now we consider it to be a disorder. It's a diagnosed disorder, and in some cases, many cases, treated with powerful drugs that have probably long-term harmful effects on the brain.
Oh, Peter, I could speak to you all day about this subject. I've got one last question to wrap this up,
Sure.
and I'm so interested to hear more about your book when it comes out. And once it does, we will definitely pop it all over our social media and ensure that everyone can see where it is, see where to buy it. But if I was to give you a megaphone to the world, to all the parents and all the educators out there, what would you say right now?
Well, boy, there's so many things but I would say to most educators and parents, start trusting kids. Start trusting kids' instincts. Stop thinking that kids are stupid. Kids are biologically designed to educate themselves. And what they need is the opportunities to do so. And that requires freedom and opportunity. It doesn't require restraint.
Oh, the perfect message.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for your time. The work that you've been doing, I feel, is so necessary. And I know that you already have had an amazing impact. Do you have the name of your book and when that will be released, or not quite yet?
So Still, we don't know the name of the book for sure. I've been tentatively calling it Restoring Childhood because there's a of childhood is a conception that is how children have lived throughout time when they're free to be children. And we've largely taken childhood away in our culture. And so the book is about how we've taken childhood away and what we need to do to bring it back. Bring back children's abilities to play, to explore, to socialize with other kids, to get into trouble and find their way out of trouble because that's part of growing up, to be ever more independent as they're growing up because that's how they learn to be grown-ups. This is kind of what the book is about. The publishing company at this point is calling it Free to Play because they want to play on the title of my previous book,
Yeah.
Free to Learn. But I tell them it's not just about play, and so we still have to decide exactly what the title will be.
Well, good luck with that. It's always hard to get a title. Uh,
Right.
Thank you. Keep changing the world, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. For anyone that's listening to this today, head to the show notes, and all of Peter's details for his website, all of his social media and his books will be there as well. And obviously subscribe. Peter, thanks again.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep thinking bigger about what's possible. I'm Liz Volpe. See you on the next episode of Generation Inspired. Follow the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next.